Hello and welcome back to the No Community channel. My name is Varun Shah, and I know I haven't been making videos for a while, but unfortunately due to personal business and trying to find a job and get other stuff going, I haven't had as much time as I'd like to make videos. I've actually been sitting on this idea, or rather this piece, for a little bit over a month. It's been a little bit tough every time I'm ready to finally make this video, or these next two videos I should say, because this is going to be a two-parter. Some new piece of information pops up that changes how I needed to put this piece together to explain it all. So just to explain, this is going to be a two-part video. The first part of this video is going to be more background and history on digital movie providers, the big ones that are there today, how we got to the landscape that we are at today between iTunes, Ultraviolet, etc. And the next part is a little bit about what is going to come potentially. Everything in this video is based upon what has already happened, and I can back it up with news articles, facts, and information that I've either experienced myself, or I could direct you perhaps in what I'll call my link dump down below to help point out key pieces of information that support what I'm saying here in this video. For part two though, that is where there's going to be a little bit of speculation that again I will do my best to support with information that I've gathered. Some of these are from anonymous sources. Some of these people are individuals who are claiming to have knowledge where I can't 100% guarantee. I will be clear on that when I get to those points. But regardless of that fact, the individuals I do choose to put on my videos or to use as sources are people who have traditionally come out in the past and given legitimate information, or information that was found to be true at a later date once the relevant people made the formal announcements about whatever new technology is coming. So, why am I doing this? The reason I'm doing this is I felt like no one is talking about this, if I'm being honest. I feel like it's a big deal. A lot of people use these digital movie providers, and we know that one day that these are going to be our only outlets to get movies. I'm presuming that physical media will eventually roll down and we will be left with solely digital providers. So it's important to get an understanding of where we're going and how we got there. So this again is going to be a video about the background of the current media environment and setting you up for the potential changes that are going to come in part two. Again, I want to thank you for continuing to watch, or if you're a first-time viewer, I appreciate you coming here. Thank you again. Let's get started. So as you can see here, it's a whole mess of providers. We have iTunes, we have Disney Movie Anywhere, we have Vudu with Ultraviolet, we have Fandango Now, which also uses Ultraviolet, Flickster, which in the US is now closed, but we'll talk about that in a little bit, Google Play, Amazon Instant Video. Again, there are a lot of providers. And the question you might be asking yourself is, why do we have this many providers? How did we get to this kind of a mess where there are so many disparate services, some of them connected, some of them not connected? How did we get here today? In 2001, Apple released iTunes, and Steve Jobs came on stage and said, there is a music revolution happening right now. If we fast forward 2 years, we come to 2003 when they launched the iTunes Store. Steve Jobs pitched this as an idea, saying that right now people are just buying CDs, ripping CDs, sharing files, and it's a wild west of digital media. Everyone wants digital files. No one is actually paying for them. They're just one person's buying the CD and then everyone's getting a copy of it. So iTunes was the first marketplace to actually sell music from the 5 big record labels. They set the precedent for selling music online and essentially became a monopoly. Consumers only wanted to use iTunes over a period of time. iPod became the major MP3 player. Then they had the iPhone, the biggest smartphone, but only used iTunes to manage it. And if you're using that to manage it, you're probably going to be using it to buy stuff as well for the convenience and for everything to flow together. When these major music labels tried to move elsewhere, they found that they just couldn't compete and had to rejoin to iTunes at a later date. Walmart has tried to launch their own music service. It ran from 2003 to 2011, closed its doors. Amazon has their own service, now Google, but none of these have been able to get the same reach as iTunes. None of them have been able to convince the consumer that they are a better product. Everyone still just uses iTunes because it's what came out first, it's what most people are using, and it's where majority of their library is. Therefore, they're just going to stick with what they already have. Then between 2003 and 2010, the digital movie era started rolling out. People wanted to watch their movies on their laptops, they wanted to watch them on their new smartphones, and eventually on their tablets. And they were trying to figure out what the best way to do that was. Initially, that was ripping their DVDs and Blu-rays and then putting them directly on their devices. But then there was a ruling saying that was illegal. So the studio said, okay, you want to do that? We will give you digital copies with your Blu-ray purchases. The way those used to work, if you recall, was you would get a code and then you'd get a digital copy disc. You'd put that disc in your CD drive on your computer, and if you wanted it on iTunes, you'd enter a code and then that was redeemed onto your iTunes account and you could download it. If you wanted it on Windows Media Player for whatever reason, you could enter it on Windows Media Player and you get a Windows Media Player file. In 2010, a lot of the major studios saw that this was happening and saw it as a sign that iTunes was going to come out on top because, as you expected, people were redeeming these mainly on iTunes. iTunes had a huge user base, iPhone was huge, all of this was happening, but they didn't want a repeat of what happened to the record industry in this sense that Apple and iTunes were essentially able to set prices. They were able to tell them how much they were going to get, pretty much because they had become a monopoly for the MP3 market. As a result of this, some of these movie studios came together and formed the Digital Entertainment Content Ecosystem, or DECE. These studios then subsequently launched a locker service that they called Ultraviolet. As of today, there are more than 28 million accounts. Now, that does not mean they're active users, but that's still a pretty big number of accounts. But let's talk about what actually happened with Ultraviolet. As you can see on the screen here, there are a bunch of providers: Vudu, Fandango Now, Flixster. There used to be a service called Cinema Now, and Target Ticket. As you can predict, Target Ticket was owned by Target. It has closed down due to lack of usage. Cinema Now actually used to be owned by Best Buy until they sold it to a UK company called Film On that recently shuttered its doors without warning a couple of months ago. Flixster was operating in the US under Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers was a partial owner. It is still operating abroad internationally, and in many cases, it is the major ultraviolet provider in many countries outside of the US. But inside the US, it shuttered its doors earlier this month. No real explanation was given for their shuttering inside the US other than a digital media provider stopped making deals with them. That's the extent of their explanation. Vudu is the major player still left, and it's honestly the best video provider in the ultraviolet system, and in my opinion personally the best video provider in general. The only other active video provider in the US is Fandango Now, formerly known as MGO. There are several other ultraviolet providers in the US. They're not really big names, so I'm not going to mention them here, and there's also a few of them abroad that are there, but not a lot of people like using them. So let me give you a quick explanation about how ultraviolet works. So when you purchase, say, a Blu-ray that says comes with a digital copy and it's an ultraviolet code, what they want you to do is they want you to go to ultraviolet.com, make an account, and that becomes your locker account. That is not where you go to stream movies, it's just where the storage information saying that I own Spider-Man Homecoming, for example, is listed. That then connects to a movie service, for example Vudu, where I can connect that ultraviolet account and stream and purchase other movies that are ultraviolet enabled there. If I purchase a film on one of these websites, then that should link back into my ultraviolet account saying, hey, he owns it on here, he should get it on all these other services if they support that title as well. Now at first glance you might say, I don't know a lot of these video providers. You may not even know about Vudu, which is the biggest out of all of them. Maybe you do, maybe you don't, but you don't see Amazon Video, you don't see iTunes, you don't see Google Play, you don't see the big hitters essentially. And the reason for that is when Ultraviolet launched, it was an unproven technology. They did try, there was rumors about Amazon trying to join, but they didn't really get that ball rolling, and they could never get the big players to join on. But the question becomes, why did they launch this service in the first place? The reason they did that is they knew that a big portion of digital acceptance would have to come from people who are buying physical media. People who are buying physical media are the ones who like to buy and collect movies the most in general. Therefore, they had to convince them in 2010 onward till today to start buying into the system, their digital provider, their company, so that in the hopes of trying to wrestle that control away from iTunes, to not let them gain that kind of control. And in some ways it worked, some ways it didn't. When it launched, you might have read headlines like Harry Potter flop with digital copies. If you recall, there was a whole fiasco with Deathly Hallows Part 2 when Warner Brothers decided that they were never going to hand out iTunes codes ever again, and that they were only handing out Ultraviolet. It became such a problem that Ultraviolet was actually issuing iTunes codes for people who just couldn't get it to work. At that time, they were only streaming via Flixster, and Flixster was not as solid of a service. It's not that great today, but it works a lot better than it did back then. And now I'm going to quickly talk about Vudu for a second because, as I said, personally, I believe it's the best video provider, even compared to Amazon, iTunes, etc. And I want to explain why. Vudu, to compete with these other big players, they added a variety of feature sets. Vudu, to be clear, is owned by Walmart, so what they actually launched initially was something called InstaWatch. What that meant was if you were to buy a title on Walmart.com or buy a title in a Walmart store, if you just scanned your receipt if you bought in store, or if you had your Walmart account linked to your Vudu, if you bought that movie from the website and it was InstaWatch enabled, which meant essentially ultraviolet enabled and part of a special list of titles, which was practically every new title coming out today. The movie would be available to stream via Vudu within a couple of hours, sometimes minutes, depending on how popular the title was. They also launched the Disc to Digital initiative, which to this day, they are the only major provider offering that. What that meant was you could take any older title. It used to be titles older than 2012, but as of recently, it's everything up until last year. You could take titles, put them in your disk drive. The Vudu app would register it and say, hey, you've got a disc version of this. And they let you initially scan 10 titles for $10. Anything less than 10 titles, it was $2. As of right now, the current pricing model is now $2 for any Blu-ray that you're trying to convert into HD and $5 for any DVD that you're trying to convert into HD. They've even innovated on that system by making it a lot easier. Now you don't even need to put the disc in your disk drive, you can just scan the barcode on the back of the title and you can purchase your titles that way. But these kinds of consumer-friendly actions are what make Vudu, in my opinion, the best provider. I don't see this kind of work being done on the other major providers as of yet. iTunes has done a couple of cool things in the past couple of weeks, which I'm going to talk about in part 2 of this video. But what I'm trying to say is Vudu essentially tried to make themselves different. They tried to make themselves accessible by being on pretty much every platform. It's on every game console I can think of, except for perhaps the Nintendo Switch. It is also on every mobile platform, and it's available on Mac, PC. But that being said, not every movie studio joined Ultraviolet. Not every title being sold on Vudu is Ultraviolet enabled. The biggest studio on that list is Disney. So now we're going to talk about what Disney's doing, and that is Disney Movies Anywhere. So what is Disney Movies Anywhere? Disney Movies Anywhere is Disney's personal own locker system. Think of it akin to Ultraviolet, but it's run and managed by Disney, and it runs on what's called the key chest system. And unlike Ultraviolet, they got the major providers. They have Vudu, they have Microsoft Video, they have Google Play, they have Amazon Video, they have iTunes, and they have their own personal streaming service called Disney Movies Anywhere, on which you can stream your Disney movies. So at first glance, you would say, hey, this is already better, but there are a couple of things. Ultraviolet allowed sharing at the Ultraviolet level, meaning at the locker system you could share with 6 other people. At the Disney level, you can only share at the service level. So if iTunes enables sharing, you can share through that. If Google allows sharing, you can share through that. But you can't share your titles universally with your friends, and they can't have it on all the services they want. But on the flip side, this locker system was launched after Ultraviolet. Disney had a chance to study what was going on, see what was going on. In the meantime, they actually stuck with the iTunes SD copies on discs, and that was how you got your Disney copies. Eventually, when they launched this service, all of those older digital copies were thankfully upgraded to HD and were available at all these services once you linked to your Disney Movies Anywhere account. So that about sums up what we're at today. Part 2 is going to talk about what some of the rumors are about what's coming up next. I'm going to mention the name right here. Movies Anywhere is the new thing that is rumored to be in the works. It is supposed to be an evolution of Disney's Movies Anywhere, and a lot of studios are supposed to be joining. I'll explain that in a little bit more detail in the next video. I want to thank you very much for watching this. I hope you will tune into the next video, because I think that's probably going to be more interesting for people looking forward to what else is coming in the future. This was more of a background on how we got to the way we are today, and I think that's very important because it'll make you understand why Ultraviolet lasted so long and why it's transitioning into this new service potentially. On a final note, if you have been a subscriber and you've been watching, I want to thank you. If you're new and you're just watching this for the first time, I would appreciate any feedback you can leave me in the comments below. Otherwise, I just want to say thanks. I'm sorry about the long wait between content. Unfortunately, it is a little bit hard for me to make content while I'm also juggling trying to find a new job right now and creating this content. I would appreciate it if you could help me figure out what I can do better in the future. As I said, please leave a comment, like, subscribe if you'd be willing to. Thank you again, and have a fantastic day.